Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Brian Geary. I serve as the chair of the Olathe Chamber of Commerce's Business to Government Advocacy Committee, and it's my honor to moderate today's forum, Senate District 37. I want to thank both of our candidates for attending today's forum. Well, the Johnson County Public Policy Council, which is comprised of the 10 Johnson County area chambers of commerce, helped develop today's questions, focusing on business and community issues. Senate District 37, again, covers portions of Gardner, Edgerton, and Olathe. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our candidates now here in alphabetical order. Our Democratic candidate, Sherry Giebler. Sherry, welcome. Sherry graduated from high school in Salina, attended Fort Hays State, where she received her bachelor's in sociology and master's in counseling and doctorate in educational leadership. She worked for over 30 years as a counselor in Hays, Johnson City, Big Bow, Mantor, Wellsville, and in Olathe at the K-12 and college levels. She's a licensed professional counselor and has worked in private practice. She's lived in Johnson County area since 1992, including Gardner, Edgerton, and now Olathe. Sherry, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The Republican candidate, Doug Shane. Doug graduated from Lewisburg High School, moved back to Lewisburg after completing his college career. He obtained a doctorate of veterinary medicine, PhD from K-State. He's currently teaching professors supporting learners in graduate degree programs related to animal health, human health, and life sciences. And before becoming an educator, he worked in R&D in the animal health industry, where he helped develop new veterinary medicines, technologies for food producing species, and pets. He, his wife, and their 4 children reside in Lewisburg. Doug, thank you for being here. Welcome. We'll get started. We'll do a 3-minute opening statement from each candidate. After that, we will do a Q&A question where each candidate will have a minute and a half to answer each question. We will alternate who goes first with each. And then at the conclusion of the forum, we will have 2 minutes for each of you to give a closing statement, at which time then we will wrap things up. There are no follow-up questions. There is no formal rebuttal time, no audience participation. So due to time constraints. And we also, again, created the speaking order and who goes first with both candidates here today, and we will alternate throughout the program. So let's get started with our opening statements by the candidates. You will now have 3 minutes to present your opening statements on why you're seeking office. Sherry, you drew the number to go first, so go ahead with your opening statement.
Awesome. Well, hello, my name is Sherry Giebler, and Senate 37 candidate. I filed in late May when there was no opponent to the current senator. And so I didn't feel that's how democracy should work. So I put my name on the ballot. I am from Central Kansas. I grew up in a working class family. My dad was a union truck driver, Teamster, and my mother worked at a travel agency. I am the first in my family to attend college. I have 3 degrees, the final degree being an EDS in educational leadership. I'm recently retired public school counselor with 32 years of experience. My education career started as a graduate assistant at Fort Hays State University while I was completing my master's in counseling and taught 2 university courses there. I then moved into elementary and middle school counseling, and I worked at Stanton County, Franklin County, and Johnson-Scadden County school districts. So really large districts to very, very tiny, almost like K-12 buildings as one school. I also worked at Johnson County Community College and their Success Center as a counselor, Fort Hays State as an adjunct professor in their EDS program, teaching the courses that are requirements for those moving into being a principal or superintendent. I'm also a licensed professional counselor in Kansas, and that credential is still up to date. I did some private practice at Midwest Anxiety in Overland Park, Kansas. I am not a career politician, but a very informed citizen that just couldn't sit idly by and do nothing about some of the bad education bills that I saw being put up. I feel that I have extensive knowledge in education and mental health issues and a very, very pragmatic view on solving problems. I'm here to listen and work with all of the constituents in Senate 37, and just very, very excited to be here. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Doug, your opening statement, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning to the Olathe Chamber and Gardner Chambers, and thank you for hosting us today. I think it's great that you guys are helping provide the platform to help us have an additional mechanism to reach voters and get our message out. First, I want to say that the state of Kansas and Senate District 37 sits in a great position of opportunity, and we've seen a lot of positive things happening, especially for Senate District 37, which includes one of the fastest growing cities in Kansas in Gardner. And that's one of the reasons why I want to be a Kansas senator and serve Senate District 37. But we also have some significant challenges ahead of us, both for the state and for our Senate district. And I think that we need to address those challenges to help ensure that Kansas remains a great place, not only for my kids to live, but my grandkids and my great-grandkids. We live in Kansas by choice, and we live in this region also by choice. And right now, it is vital to have a senator who knows how to work in multidisciplinary professional teams, to work across lines, to solve tough problems, because certainly we do have some sitting in front of us. I'm the son of a high school dropout and a United States Marine. And my parents started their business out of the back of a station wagon and grew it from the back of the station wagon into a U.S. metals domestic manufacturing company here in the Kansas City Metro. And being raised in that environment, I got to see the heart and the passion that my parents had, not only to grow a business and to provide for their family, but also to meet the needs of their employees and to have that important relationship between employer and employee, and also being a member of the community. And they made sure that I learned the grit and the determination and the work ethic to try to make it work. I think I was probably 4 or 5 years old the first time my dad brought home a box of several thousand brass fittings and threw them on the floor and said, "Go ahead, get to work and start assembly." And that work ethic has remained with me throughout my entire professional career. Now, of course, I did not go into fittings manufacturing and into the metals industry, but I pursued higher education, and I've always been driven to make the world a better place and improve animal health and welfare, specifically as it relates to protein production and food production in the United States. And that's why I obtained a bachelor's degree in animal science and industry, a veterinary degree, and a PhD in production medicine and epidemiology, where I learned how to work with cow-calf operations and feedlots. And I want to take all of that training, that knowledge of working in the animal health corridor for my entire career, and take that knowledge and that passion and go problem solve for the people of Senate District 37 and the people of Kansas, and take all of those important dynamics and synergies and make sure that we're making good and sound policy decisions to grow our state.
Great. Thank you both. We'll move on to the question and answer portion of this, again, where you will each have a minute and a half to answer each question. We will rotate the order in which you answer the question. So we will begin with Doug on question number 1 here. What are your views on state tax policy, being as specific as you can?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the state of Kansas sits in an important point of time when it comes to tax policy. We rank poorly, and I'm going to use poorly in the sense that we have a fairly high tax burden across the board, whether we're looking at property taxes, income tax, or sales tax. And we've had some positive momentum. We are, of course, eliminating the sales tax on groceries, but we still have a tax burden that makes it not so friendly to do business in Kansas sometimes, and so and not so friendly to live in Kansas at times. And so we need to address that affordability crisis while making sure we maintain a taxation system between all the different ways that we tax that provides adequate revenue, but doesn't put us into territory where we're making it where people cannot sustain a career or stay in their home, especially if they live on fixed incomes. So specifically, I think we need to, of course, address the important issue of property taxes, and I think that's going to be something that we focus on this next legislative session. I also think that we need to address state income and state business taxes. To me, the best form of economic development is to make it so that the tax and the regulatory environment is pro-business, and making it so that we can bring in not just any business, but bring in strong businesses that can help people establish careers and serve their communities. And so I think that we will look at property tax reductions and reforms, as well as I'd like to see some additional income tax reforms and reductions as well.
Thank you, Sherry. I'll ask you the same question. What are your views on state tax policy, being as specific as you can?
I support a fair tax policy benefiting working families, seniors, veterans, and those on fixed incomes. We need to make sure that the wealthiest individuals and large corporations are paying their share. I'll oppose any tax plans that favor corporations over working families and seniors. We need property tax relief, especially for those that need it the most. I'll support removing sales tax on groceries and personal hygiene items, toothpaste, soap, and diapers for children and adults. Insurance and property taxes need to be moderated to help working individuals and households. I support a sustainable and responsible tax policy. There should be targeted tax reliefs towards small and local businesses in order to foster economic growth and job creation here in our state.
All right, thank you. Sherry, you'll answer the next question first. What are your views on K-12 education funding and accessibility?
Okay. In my 32 years as a K-12 public school teacher and counselor and also college level, I strongly believe in public education. I believe it's the foundation for our state. The state should invest in public K-12 schools to ensure that every child has access to a high-quality education. This includes attracting and retaining the best teachers. I can tell you firsthand that teachers sometimes can feel vilified at times, not appreciated or treated as the professionals that they are. For years, teachers have been doing more with less. During the Gannon lawsuit, it was determined that Kansas teachers were among the most efficient in the nation. I'm committed to equipping teachers with the tools that they need. We need to make sure that school facilities are safe and providing necessary resources for students. We should also focus on reducing class sizes and put Kansas on the path to fully funding special education. Nearly 90,000 students are in special education or gifted programs, which are funded through special ed, which means that almost 1 in 5 Kansans students receive special education services. But the special education funding gap actually impacts all Kansas students because schools end up diverting funds away from other areas to provide for these services. I do not support vouchers. They use public school tax dollars for private schools with no oversight or accountability.
Thank you. Doug, I'll ask you the same question. Your views on K-12 education funding and accessibility.
Yeah, in the state of Kansas, I actually love the fact that the right to educational, scientific, and vocational training is embedded in our Constitution, and I think that that's a really great part about our state. When it comes to the funding of public schools, Republican or Democrat, I don't think there's any disagreement on making sure that there's adequate funding to support our public schools. And now as we look forward into the next year, and we're looking at now revisiting the school finance formula, I think that what we need to focus on is making sure that resources are allocated the way that they need to support academic achievement and outcomes out of our public schools. And I think that some of that is making the formula work better for more districts. For some districts, the formula works very well. For other districts, the formula does not work so well, and we see some gaps. And so I think that's going to be an opportunity. And we need to focus on working together both with local school boards and the State Department of Education on how do we not just talk about the money, but how do we make sure that the money is working to drive achievement and outcomes that are needed for Kansans. Right now, about 40% of students going on to a 2-year institution require remedial training in English, and it's about 25% to about 33% of college freshmen in a 4-year institution. So that means that of all high school graduates, we have far too many students that cannot read and do basic math. We need to make sure we're working with our educators and making sure that we're giving them the tools and the resources that we need to drive really, really good academic achievement. And I think funding, of course, is going to be the mechanism, one of the mechanisms to do that.
Great. Thank you. Doug, you'll answer this next question first. What types of economic development policies do you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
Yeah, and this is a challenging question because the Kansas City Metro is a very different region from the western parts of the states. And so it's a complex question. I'll speak, I guess, mostly to Senate District 37 and this region. Generally, I am not supportive of what I would call corporate welfare. I think what most people would call corporate welfare. And I think the best mechanisms to economic development is to foster a pro-business environment where it's not just the largest corporations that can get tax abatements and packages and programs, but it also facilitates the growth of somebody that has the passion to grow their own small business. So we need to work on policy that accomplishes that. And if we are going to use tax abatement or incentive programs, we need to make sure that there are provisions in there to protect the taxpayer, or in the example of like a Panasonic package deal, we need to say, okay, you're going to bring in all of these jobs, but how do we also make sure that as an entity, if you're going to receive tax incentive, you are also going to help meet the needs of your workers, whether that's access to childcare or supporting local infrastructure, so on and so forth. And so we need to make sure that when we're putting those packages together, they actually work for the people as well in the region and supporting the growth of the region. Generally speaking, though, I want to see a tax and regulatory environment that's pro-business.
Thank you. Sherry, I'll ask you the same question. What types of economic development policies do you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
Good, thank you. I support policies that provide incentives for small businesses and local startups, investing in infrastructure improvements such as high-speed internet, bridges and roads, and transportation. Those are crucial for attracting and retaining businesses. In Kansas, we must continue to strive for the Gold Shovel Awards. There have been about 68,000 jobs that were created and retained since 2019. The state ranks third in the U.S. for the quality of its infrastructure and also ranks among the most business-friendly states in the nation. So to support workforce training, that'll align with the needs of the growing industries and ensure a very skilled labor pool for employers. Medicaid expansion will help businesses and create jobs. One important way that we can support our small businesses is by expanding Medicaid. A statewide poll released by the Sunflower Foundation in February revealed that 83% of small business owners favor expanding Medicaid in Kansas. Medicaid expansion would create nearly 22,000 jobs and help our healthcare workers shortage. Kansas business owners could save up to $80 million per year in healthcare costs if Medicaid were expanded.
Thank you. And Sherry, you'll answer this next question first. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
Okay. Well, Kansas, and especially Senate 37, is a very unique manufacturing area. The state, with our major strongholds in agriculture, food processing, as well as aviation and consumer electronics. We need to develop our workforce. I would advocate for vocational and technical training programs, partnerships with local businesses for apprenticeship programs and opportunities, and improved access to higher education. To continue support for these programs at the high school and also expand them to rural districts. Career and technical education should be supported and expanded to prepare our students to thrive in a 21st century economy.
Thank you. And Doug, I'll ask you the same question. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
Yeah, and working as a professor at one of our region schools in a land-grant institution, this is a conversation that we have on a routine and regular basis. I think that it's going to be a coordinated effort, and I think there's some discovery happening in education on how do we make sure that we're setting outcomes and we're setting together training programs that work and are appropriate for the workforce. So we've gone from everybody has to go to college to saying, well, now maybe we actually need to curate training programs that actually match what the employer needs out of their workforce. And so I think that working through K through 12, with the 2-year colleges, 4 years, and making sure that programs are curated and matched to develop skill sets and knowledge sets that match what's needed in the workforce. I think that that's an environment that Topeka can help foster that, right? And there's not maybe so much fingers woven in, but it's more fostering the environment to help make sure that that is happening. And also, again, as we look back at funding to both higher education institutions and through K through 12, making sure that we're tying many ways, making sure that achievement and those outcomes are matching what's needed for the workforce as well. And I think it's a collaborative effort. And I think that Topeka will have an important role in that, working with local educators as well.
Thank you. All right, moving along, Doug, you'll have this answer first. What are your views on the state's role with respect to ensuring access and affordability to post-secondary education?
Yeah, it's obviously given my profession as a professor, I obviously believe in higher education. I think that the state has a clear role in helping support higher education in the state of Kansas, and it's an important piece of the puzzle to workforce training and development. Now, ideally, we'll try to keep more of those graduates in Kansas as we move forward. I think one of the things that we can try to push for in Kansas is try to make sure that there's, competition is good, but we also run into where it's really hard for somebody to take credits somebody has earned at a community college and sometimes transfer those over into a 4-year institution. And so I think trying to make sure that there's more articulation agreements in place, that the universities and the 2-year institutions need to share recognition and credits and achievement of learners, I think is important. And I think that enhances accessibility and helps reduce cost for people pursuing higher education in Kansas. I think that's something that we can accomplish in the short term, and hopefully we can build a lot of commitment to from all of our different institutions in Kansas.
Great, thank you. And Sherry, I'll ask you the same question. What are your views on the state's role with respect to ensuring access and affordability of post-secondary education?
Okay. I support policies that play a proactive role in making post-secondary education more accessible and affordable. Investments that will increase needs-based aid, making it possible for more low-income Kansans to attend college. This includes increasing funding for public universities and community college, expanding some scholarship programs, and reducing student loan debt. It's less sexy, but again, we're going back to that internet accessibility is also crucial for rural working and adult students returning for higher education online. When I worked at Fort Hays State University as an adjunct professor in that EDS program, so many of our rural students struggled to get their assignments in on time just because of the internet. And so that is very unfortunate. So that is one thing that we need to kind of intertwine. We need policies that ensure Kansas has a robust workforce and increase funding for those post-secondary education. When looking to put down roots or expand operations, businesses are looking for states that have a high-skilled prepared workforce.
Thank you. And Sherry, you'll answer this question first. There's been a lot of discussion about foreign land ownership, as well as purchasing equipment containing foreign manufactured parts. What factors do you consider when attempting to balance national security concerns with free enterprise and private property rights?
Okay. It's not difficult to understand why we should be very concerned about foreign entities owning large amounts of land. The reality, it is minimal, with individuals from adversarial countries owning very little. China owns, I think, a half an acre in Russell County. Legislation on this issue should be pragmatic and done with transparency and communication with federal agencies so we don't disrupt legitimate investment and business relationships. I'm equally concerned about the consolidation of family farms into corporate conglomerates. Our food supply, specifically competitive pricing, is threatened more by large companies monopolizing these areas of agriculture than right now by foreign ownership. In Topeka, I think we just need to promote policy that supports family farmers and local producers. I would not be willing to sign a bill that has the potential to hurt Kansas's future prosperity or economic development. The legislature should consider kind of a narrow, more forward-looking proposal focused on those bad actors if it's serious about protecting Kansas from foreign adversaries.
Okay. Thank you. Doug, I'll ask you the same question. There's been a lot of discussion about foreign land ownership, as well as purchasing equipment containing foreign manufactured parts. What factors do you consider when attempting to balance national security concerns versus free enterprise and private property rights?
Yeah, so I'll start off focusing on the supply side. There's a lot of reason to try to onshore manufacturing and parts. I hope that would mostly be a marketplace-driven initiative. Obviously, growing up in a U.S. domestic manufacturing family and being involved in the pharmaceutical industry and animal health, I have seen both some of the pros, but also the consequences of having a global supply chain, especially as we look at drug manufacturing and the fact that most active pharmaceutical ingredients are manufactured offshore in China and India. When it comes to the land ownership question, this is a complex issue because in the United States, property ownership rights are not just tied to being a citizen. You can buy property as a non-U.S. citizen, and so we have to navigate that and ensure if we have an immigrant family or somebody that's here on a temporary basis that they can buy a home. But then we also need to address the security issues as it relates to large acquisitions of land in the state. And I trust that we will be able to work through that with good legal counsel to come up with a solution that is viable and allows companies. We have to recognize in farming that a lot of the corporate entities that own farmland and operate farms are actually families themselves. They've actually just incorporated because it's a sound business practice. And so we need to make sure that we are protecting the ability to farm and have land ownership while also protecting our national and our state interests. It'll be a complex problem, but I think we're up to the test.
Thank you. Doug, you'll answer this question first. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I have yet to see the government get involved in healthcare or increase funding in some capacity that doesn't result in reduction of access and increase of costs. And so I think we need to be very wary when we assume that Medicaid expansion would by default make care more accessible or reduce costs. We do have things we can do to try to reduce costs and increase access, and that would be to address the regulatory complexity and compliance complexity of the healthcare system in Kansas. I think that's an important one that we can address. Increase the competitiveness of the marketplace for insurance, I think, is an important initiative as well. And we also need to make sure that we are protecting small practitioners and small doctors' offices as well, because we're seeing continued loss, and we're also seeing this on the pharmacy side. The United States loses one independent small pharmacy per day right now because of marketplace structure and regulatory environment. And that is something else that we need to address. So generally speaking, no, right now I'm not in favor of the governor's proposed Medicaid expansion plan. I don't think that'll be helpful. I think it'll be harmful, but there are things that we can do to try to improve costs and access.
All right, thank you. Sherry, I'll ask you the same question. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion?
I think despite overwhelming public support echoing for over 6 years, we have a supermajority that has consistently failed to deliver on this pressing need. To me, it's not a partisan issue. Over 70% of Kansas, regardless of party, support Medicaid expansion. Just a few in the legislature is to be standing in the way of this expansion. Medicaid expansion is not just about providing healthcare access. It's about honoring the voice of Kansans, ensuring that every individual, regardless of circumstances, receives the care and support they deserve. So by expanding Medicaid, we can bridge that healthcare gap and affirm our commitment to a healthier state. This will help our hospitals, our workforce, and our economy. I think it's time to expand Medicaid and keep those dollars in Kansas instead of sending them elsewhere.
Thank you. And our final question, Sherry, you'll go first in this one. How control over decision-making is divided among the state legislature and local government, including local school boards, on issues such as taxation, economic development, and education has been a matter of debate. What are your views on this issue?
Okay. I'm in favor of local control. Local governments, school boards should have significant control over decisions that directly impact their own communities. They can have direct communication with constituents, which is essential for ensuring transparency. Local government officials are closer to the people they serve, and they have an easier time connecting with those constituents. Local government can utilize the strength of local governance to communicate with their constituents often and to learn what they need. School boards are very unique to each community, and state statutes that say exactly how they should run their meeting, who is allowed to speak, etc., should not be implemented to a one-size-fits-all approach. That would undermine the local elected officials. However, state legislature should provide a consistent standard of adequate funding to ensure that equity across the state.
Thank you. Doug, I'll ask you the same question. How control over decision-making is divided among the state legislature and local government, including local school boards, on issues such as taxation, economic development, and education has been a matter of debate. What are your views on this issue?
Yeah, the state of Kansas and our country is really designed on a governance structure that represents people at the local level, right? And that's why we have our hierarchy of government, and that local control is embedded and in design in our state. So I think it's an important issue. I think really our challenges in Kansas have centered around a lot of finger pointing and some lack of consistency on when we want to say we have home rule versus when we expect Topeka to do something. And I think that trying to create broader alignment and consistency on when is this a local control issue versus when is this something that belongs in Topeka as far as an issue to address, we need to create consistency and communicate that consistently and effectively to our local officials. And I think this is also going to be an ongoing discussion, especially as it relates to taxation. We know that a significant percentage of folks' property taxes are of course going to support local public schools. Well, that's a difficult issue, right? Because it's kind of a state tax and it's kind of a local tax. And so I think we need to make sure we're clear, we're concise, and we're consistent. And then that'll help us gain better alignment as we move forward. But certainly, I absolutely believe in the concept and the principles of local control.
Thank you. That concludes our question and answer portion. and we'll move on to the closing statements by both candidates. As a reminder, each candidate will have 2 minutes to present their closing statement. Ask you please be sure to highlight what most distinguishes you from your opponent. And Doug, you will go first in the closing statements.
I've been blessed to grow up in the environment that I have grown up in, and blessed to have a very supportive wife and 4 loving kids, and have exposure to working side by side with a convicted felon who's trying to get back up on his feet and get back out into the workforce, all the way through to working in an environment, working with fellow scientists to develop new drugs. And I've worked in international teams, and I've worked side by side with a blue-collar worker. And it's given me a lot of perspectives that are unique, and I've had the opportunity to learn and grow professionally through those times and learn how to be a better service to the public and seeking a leadership position like the Kansas Senate. My commitment to the citizens of Senate District 37 is to not just focus on working with Republicans, but to work on building strong and diverse teams to try to make things better for Kansas. And I think that's what people want to see out of Topeka, is people working together to try to make things better and not just have partisan jockeying. And that is something that I'm really passionate about trying to do for the people of Kansas. Thank you again to the Olathe and Gardner Chambers for hosting us. Thank you to my mom for attending today. And thank you to my wife, Caitlin, who, of course, has been through my side throughout my entire professional journey and through this campaign. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Sherry, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement, please.
Okay, and again, I say thank you so much for allowing us to come to do this forum. I think that, from the very beginning, when I decided to throw my name on the ballot, I decided that I was running for all of Senate 37. It is a huge, funky map. It is all over the board. Every once in a while, I still have to double check in my south of 119 to my north. But I have come to love my constituents very much. I have been on the trail every day, knocking on doors. And I'm knocking on every door. They're not just Democratic doors. They're unaffiliated, they're Republican, they're Libertarian. They don't even know, but they know they're voting. And so I've had some really deep conversations, some very meaningful conversations with my constituents. And I think in the end, they're just ready to focus on real everyday issues that impact their lives. And that's so representing Miami and Johnson County is not going to be difficult, because I think it's just the fact that you listen and that you're leading, but that you're also listening to what they need and what they want. So I'm excited. This has been a great opportunity, taking in everything that I know about education and mental health. And I just look forward to continuing being the path of knocking on doors. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you both. That concludes our forum for Senate District 37. I want to thank both candidates, the Democratic candidate, Sherry Giebler, and Republican candidate Doug Shane. Thank you both for being here and taking part in this important forum, but also thank you for your willingness to serve our community. So it takes a lot to do, and I appreciate that, and we all do as well. So thank you again to both of you. And on behalf of the Olathe Chamber of Commerce and all the area Johnson County chambers, thank you to everyone who's been watching this for taking advantage of this important opportunity to learn more about our candidates in this very important election. For more information about candidates, other videos of these and candidate forums, advanced voting details, and all kinds of information, visit www.votejoco.com. And please share this voter resource with your friends, your colleagues, family members, so they become more informed as well. With that, again, thank you to both candidates for being here, and thank you again for attending and watching. We are adjourned.